911 received the call at 11:47 p.m. It was a man's voice, controlled barely, telling the dispatcher that someone had broken into his home and that his wife had been shot and that he had fired back and that there was a body on the floor. The dispatcher, she stayed on the line. Officers were already rolling. And what those officers found when they walked through that door in Daytona Beach, Florida on the night of November the 4th, 1989, the blood on the walls, the young man dead on the floor, the woman barely clinging to life in her own bed, looked on the surface like a horrible tragedy. A random, terrible, senseless tragedy. But y'all, it was not random, and it damn sure wasn't senseless. Every single thing in that room had been arranged, calculated, and listen to me, designed. Designed with the perfection of an architecture. And the man who designed it was standing right there when they walked in, red-eyed, shaking just enough, telling his story with the practiced grief of someone who had been rehearsing it for a very, very long time. Y'all, his name was Costa Batopoulos. That's right, Costa Batopoulos. And this is the story of how he nearly got away with everything.
Down a dirt road where the pines grow tall, got a tale tonight that'll chill us all. Pull up a chair by the firelight glow. There's secrets in the South that the old folks know. It's DJ Southern storytelling, come on in.
Y'all, you got to understand that Costa Batopoulos was, by all outward appearances, exactly the kind of man a small Florida city loves to celebrate. You see, he had arrived in Daytona Beach like a man who had already decided he was destined for greatness. He was Greek-born, dashingly handsome, and armed with a personality that could fill a room the moment he walked through the door. Costa had a gift. A genuine but terrifying gift. For making people feel like the most important person in the world when he turned his attention on them. Folks, that kind of charisma is rare. And like most rare things, it can either be a blessing or a weapon. And Costa, he chose the weapon. Now, by the mid-1980s, he had married into serious money. And folks, I mean some serious cash. His wife, Lisa Paspalakis, and I did my best on that, was the daughter of a Greek-American family that had built real, lasting wealth through the restaurant and entertainment business in Daytona Beach. Paspalakis family owned Joyland, a sprawling, beloved entertainment complex. It was the kind of place families made memories for generations. And when Costa married Lisa, he didn't just marry a woman. Costa married an empire. And Costa, folks, he never forgot it for one single day. Lisa, hey, by all accounts from people who knew her, was a kind soul. She was soft-spoken, warm in the way that some people just naturally are. The kind of warmth you cannot manufacture or fake. She loved her husband, and she trusted Costa completely. And unfortunately, hey, that trust would nearly cost her everything. Hey y'all, just a quick interruption here. If you like your true crime stories told with compassion, dignity, and respect, well, you're in the right place, because that's exactly how DJ tells you. So please consider hitting the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and bang that notification bell so it rings in everybody's ears for years. Let's get back to the story. Man, Costa threw himself into running the family business with what looked like ambition, but was, in reality, something far, far more calculated. He expanded operations, inserted himself into the community, and cultivated a public image so carefully constructed it was practically art. But behind the curtain, Costa was a man of extraordinary appetites. This man wasn't satisfied with what he had. And what he had, most people would have considered a life beyond dreaming. But Costa, he wanted more money. He wanted more control, more power, more of everything, all the time, without limit or consequence. And he also wanted someone other than his wife. And her name was Deidre Hunt. Deidre was 22 years old, sharp as a tack and possessed of a wild, reckless energy that matched something dark inside Costa that Lisa, gentle, trusting Lisa, never, ever would have. Deidre worked for Costa, and what started as an affair quickly became something far, far more disturbing. These two people didn't just fall into each other's arms, they fell into each other's madness. And I mean madness. Together, they built a fantasy world, a private mythology of power and dominance they called, in chilling seriousness, a hunter-killer club. They spoke about eliminating enemies. They talked about being above ordinary people, above ordinary consequences, above everyday ordinary rules. Y'all, they fed each other's worst impulses like fire feeds on dry wood. And all the while, Costa was running numbers in his head, like Lisa's inheritance, the family fortune, roughly $700K, that would pass entirely to him if Lisa were simply gone. He just needed the right tool. In Costa, he found the exact right tool at his pool hall. Y'all, his name was Mark Anderson, and he was just 18 years old. Lord have mercy, sit with that just a minute, y'all. He was just 18. Mark was the kind of kid who haunted pool halls the way that teenagers do. Not out of malice, just out of that aimless, searching energy that young men carry around, kind of like a second skin. He was local. He was from Daytona Beach. He was impressionable. And he had the profound misfortune, and I said misfortune, of catching the eye of Costa Fotopoulos at exactly the wrong moment in his young life. Costa, he had a talent for finding people like Mark, people on the edge of things, people who could be shaped, molded. He cultivated the boy's loyalty the way a farmer cultivates a crop, with patience, with deliberate care, and with small kindnesses designed to build a debt that could never quite be repaid. And y'all know, nothing is for free. He gave Mark money. He gave him attention. He gave him the intoxicating feeling of being chosen, of mattering to someone important. And then, when Mark was sufficiently molded, Costa asked him for something in return. He wanted Mark to kill Lisa. Y'all, just sit with that for a moment, okay? Because Mark Anderson was not a killer. He was not a hardened criminal or a sociopath. He was a teenager who had been groomed by a very manipulative, calculating man who understood exactly how to exploit youth and loyalty and need. But that never does excuse what happened. But it explains, in the most heartbreaking way imaginable, how an 18-year-old boy ended up with blood on his hands and then ended up with far worse. And Costa filmed it. Every bit of it, all of it. Now get this, y'all. Before he ever sent Mark Anderson after Lisa, Costa had been testing the boy, conditioning him, escalating the ask little by little, in that slow boiling frog way that manipulation always works. Each step just small enough that turning back feels harder than going forward. And to document, or perhaps to celebrate, what he was building, Costa kept a damn camera running. There exists in the evidence files of this case an entire videotape. And what's on that tape? Mark Anderson can be seen killing a man named Brian Chase, another young local who had made the catastrophic mistake of drifting into Costa's orbit. Costa orchestrated the killing and filmed it. Not out of necessity, not for blackmail, though that certainly came in useful later, out of desire, out of the sheer unfathomable pleasure he took in wielding the power of life and death over another human being. He watched that damn tape afterward. He and Deidre watched it together. Prosecution, they would later call it a snuff film. That is precisely what it was. And it was still sitting in Costa's possession on the night of November the 4th, the night the whole operation came apart at the seams. And here we lay out Costa's plan. And in Costa's mind was freaking airtight. Gonna send Mark into the house, have him shoot Lisa in her sleep. And then Costa, who would conveniently be there, positioned and ready, would walk in and shoot Mark dead. No loose ends, no witnesses, just a terrible story. Grieving husband comes home to find an intruder standing over his dying wife. Husband acts in self-defense. Wife succumbs to her wounds. Husband inherits the entire fortune. Case closed. Move the hell on. Mark Anderson crept into that house in the dark and made his way to the bedroom where Lisa lay sleeping. He raised a .22 caliber pistol and he fired. And then Costa Fotopoulos walked in and shot that 18-year-old boy dead until he stopped moving. When officers arrived and found the scene, Lisa bleeding in the bed, Mark dead on the floor, Costa standing there with his practiced grief. The whole tableau looked exactly the way that it was meant to look. Tragic, random, heartbreaking, clean. Almost. Y'all, Lisa Fotopoulos, she did not die. She should have, because a .22 caliber round fired into a person's skull at close range is, well, statistically, not something a person walks away from. You know, the human body is a mystery and a marvel. And sometimes, in the most desperate, necessary moments, it simply refuses to give up. Now, the bullet entered Lisa's head, and in a trajectory that surgeons would later struggle to fully explain, missed every critical structure in her brain. She was rushed into emergency surgery, and while doctors fought to save her life, investigators started pulling at the threads of Costa's story. Y'all, and apparently there were threads everywhere. Mark Anderson, the supposed random intruder, was not a stranger. Remember, he worked for Costa. He frequented the man's pool hall. He was known to him. The story of a random burglar who happened to target the home of his own employer and then choose to shoot the sleeping woman rather than grab anything valuable and run Y'all, that story had the structural integrity of a wet cardboard in a goddamn rainstorm. Detectives kept pulling. Now, when investigators brought Deidre Hunt in for questioning, remember who Deidre Hunt is. It's Costa's 22-year-old mistress, partners in the Hunter and Killer Club. They did not yet know the full scope of what they were dealing with. They knew something smelled rotten. They could smell it. They just didn't know yet that they were standing at the edge of an abyss. Deidre? Well, it kind of turned out that she didn't have Costa's steel. She did not have his coldness, his pathological calm, or his absolute certainty that he was untouchable. She was 22 years old and she was freaking terrified. And somewhere underneath the darkness she had willingly waded into, there was still enough of a human being left in her to understand that the walls were closing in, and she talked. Lord Almighty, this woman sang like a freaking canary. She told investigators about the Hunter Killer Club, about the obsession with power, about Costa's plan to eliminate Lisa and claim all of the inheritance. She told them about Brian Chase. She also told them about the damn videotape. And just like that, what had looked like a home invasion turned into something so monstrous that even the seasoned investigators working the case, man, they had to stop and go collect themselves. They obtained the tape, they watched it, and whatever any of them expected to see, man, it was way worse. The old Costa, he had spent years constructing a version of himself that the world would believe. The successful businessman, the charming husband, the grieving hero who had fought back against an intruder in defense of his lovely wife. Every single piece of it was a damn lie. That tape, it destroyed him. Deidre's testimony destroyed him. The trail of manipulation, of grooming, of orchestrated violence reaching back well before the night of November the 4th, all of it came pouring out like floodwater through a dam, and there was nothing left to hold it back. At trial, Costa maintained his innocence with a calm that observers found deeply unsettling. It's the kind of calm that doesn't come from righteousness, but from a man so convinced of his own superiority that even the moment of reckoning feels, to him, kind of like a damn temporary inconvenience. Thank God the jury did not share his damn confidence. Costa Fotopoulos was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death, and he sits on Florida's death row to this damn day. The empire gone, the fortune gone, the carefully constructed image reduced to ash. Deidre Hunt was convicted as well for her role in the conspiracy and the murder of Brian Chase. She also received a life sentence. And so we come, at last, to the end of this story. But before we go, before you close this out and walk back into your ordinary mercy of your day, I need you to stay just one moment longer. Because this story, like all true stories, deserves to be laid down properly. It deserves to be released with the weight that it carries. So let us speak the names that matter. Brian Chase, a young man whose life was stolen on film for the entertainment of two people who felt nothing. May he be remembered as more than a footnote. May the ground he rests in be soft, and may the peace that was ripped from him in this life find him fully in the next. Mark Anderson, 18 years old, shaped and sharpened into a weapon by a man who saw his hunger to belong and called it an opportunity. He made choices. God knows he did. But he made them with a compass that had been deliberately broken by someone he trusted. May mercy find him where justice could not reach, May somebody somewhere still speak his name with something other than condemnation. And Lisa, oh, sweet, trusting Lisa, who loved a man who was already calculating her death on the day that they said their vows, who survived a bullet to the head, who woke up in a hospital and had to be told that the life she thought she was living was nothing but a stage set. Every piece of it arranged by someone who saw her not as a person, but as an obstacle between himself and a hefty bank account. Lisa walked out of that hospital anyway. She rebuilt her life anyway. Y'all, there is a kind of courage in this world that never gets called courage because it doesn't look like charging a hill or pulling someone from a burning building. It looks like getting up in the morning when you have every reason not to. It looks like choosing to continue when continuation itself feels like the hardest thing you've ever been asked to do. Lisa Potopoulos chose to continue. And now we close this out the way it deserves to be closed. May the wicked find the walls they build around themselves closing in tighter with every passing year. May the cells that hold them be quiet and long and full of nothing but the echo of what they chose to be. May the investigators who pulled at the threads, who refused to accept a pretty lie just because it was convenient, may they know that their stubbornness saved a life. May they rest easy. May the survivors of this entire world, the Lisas, the ones who were targeted and used and nearly destroyed, and who got up anyway, may they be surrounded by people worthy of their trust this time. May they know warmth that is real. May they know love that cost the person giving it something genuine. May all of us, every single one of us who has listened to this story tonight, may we go out from this place just a little more awake, just a little more willing to look past the charming smile and the gold watch and the handshake that feels too smooth, just a little more inclined to ask when something doesn't sit right in our spirit. Why doesn't this feel true? Because you see, evil rarely announces itself. It dresses up. It shakes hands. It buys rounds at the bar and shows up to community meetings and says all the right things in all the right order. But it cannot hide forever. Truth has a way of surviving, just like Lisa did. Now go on now. Go home safe. Hold the people you love a little tighter tonight. And don't you ever stop asking questions.